Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chirag Agarwal, and I'm going to be the moderator of this session, Future and Development of FinTech. Quite interesting topic. So by profession, let me introduce myself. I'm Chartered Accountant, and I'm one of the directors of Trade Reboot. I am General Manager of Earningo Consultancy as well. Have been in UAE since last 5 years, and I'm managing the clients and helping the clients with respect to managing their statutory compliances, helping in increasing the profitability and cash flow of the companies. So I would like to welcome all and thank you so much for accepting the participation. And I would like to welcome all by introducing you. And it's my privilege and honor to be here in front of all of you. So let's welcome ladies first, Miss Carmen James. She is financial services and ICT sector lead at Abu Dhabi Investment Office. And she is investment professional leading FDI origination and interaction in areas such as asset management, commodity, trading, fintech, mobility, media, and many more. Welcome, Ms. Carmel, to the session.
Thank you for having me.
We have Ms. Gabrielle. I hope I have pronounced your name correctly. Thank you. Ms. Gabrielle, she is head of market development within the Financial Services Regulatory Authority at ADGM. Her expertise includes the implementation of new technologies and business models within financial institutions. She is frequent speaker at leading conferences and has authored a number of white papers and articles on innovation in the financial industry, including Forbes, Emmy. Thank you so much. Welcome, Ms. Gabriel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We have Mr. Mohammed Adam. He is Business and Strategy Director at Triple Payments. Mr. Mohammed Adam is an innovative strategist with more than 25 years of business experience and extensive background in planning and managing cross-functional multidiscipline at both the levels, international as well as national levels. And he is also working towards, from last 14 years, he has been involved in digital payment development and currently engaged with Dubai government cashless initiative through the DED, Unified Payment Network Program. Welcome, Mr. Mohammed Adam. We have Mr. Pankaj Mundra, and I know him personally. He is eminent banker and a chartered accountant by profession, having worked with regional and global banks. Pankaj was also the chairman of ICAI, Institute of Chartered Accountants of Dubai chapter. And he is founder of Nimai, and currently he is in the process of launching of unique trade finance fintech. Welcome, Mr. Pankaj Mundra.
Thank you, Chirag. Thank you once again. Thank you, everyone.
So before we start the question session, just, let's brief something. This is the decade of, I believe, digital transformation, isn't it? And I have one, facts. Disruptive financial technology is a fast-moving global phenomenon. In 2019 itself, fintech investments amounted to US dollars 55.3 billion, and fintech ranks among the top 5 industries with companies listing $1 billion valuation or higher. So this is the power of fintech, and we are in the new decade. So I would like to ask Ms. Carmen James. See, Carmen, fintech is impacting an economy at large, by reducing the cost, involvement of resources, and then the time involved. What do you think? What the overview of the financial services with regards to technology in the new decade, 2020, 2030, and where do you see down the line the prospects of fintech and the potential growth in this particular industry? Ms. Carmen.
I might give a very quick answer here because a lot of what I'll say will be related to my colleague Gabrielle. I think the future in the next decade is just very simply like blockchain. Its applications for in banking and in capital markets, and something that we've been working within Abu Dhabi is working very closely with Abu Dhabi Global Market to tap into what they're building in terms of their digital asset regime to help attract innovative companies to come and grow and set up in Abu Dhabi while taking advantage of that really innovative forward-thinking regulation that they're building there. I might hand over to Gabrielle as well.
Thanks, Carmen, for the shout out already. I mean, I'm happy to jump on your question as well while we're all together. It's true that evidently like finance is changing in the last, 10 years. We've seen things progressed so much. And what I think what we could say is that, yes, it's true. Blockchain is very, very interesting at the moment because there's a number of different possibilities that you can look at. You can look at different use cases, whether it's within the financial industry and within banks itself. But then we've also seen we've also seen decentralized finance coming around. We've seen people are actually building things outside. And so ultimately the question is, how can you create a cohesive financial environment that actually answers to all these participants over the next decade and so. And actually on top of blockchain, as you mentioned, what could also potentially be interesting is the fact that as people become more comfortable with financial services, not necessarily coming directly through a large bank per se, but coming through smaller startups, smaller fintechs and such, it'll mean that there's going to be a plethora of different, services that I would actually call these microservices that are going to be able to really feed to niche consumers that maybe larger corporations and larger financial institutions haven't been able to service in the past. And so we're looking forward to being able to regulate all of that in a very safe, secure, and eventually neutral environments so that there is the means of essentially leveling the playing field for everybody who wants to provide good financial services.
Thank you for enlightening this. So Gabriel, you are from regulator side, yeah, and if you talk about innovation, regulators and innovators, they have to work together, isn't it? And just one question for you, since you are from regulator side, technology is one thing. However, without the support of regulators, this fintech industry and companies cannot function in a seamless fashion. So one question, as you mentioned, the fintech startups, about that, can you highlight, are there any regulatory framework in place to enable the fintech startups, to thrive? There are so many startups are upcoming, emerging for this technology driven products, be it blockchain, artificial intelligence. So regulator like ADGM, what initiatives are there in terms of, to motivate these startups companies?
So I like the fact that you pointed out the fact that, regulators and fintechs need to work together in order to be able to provide their services seamlessly, because if they weren't working together, well, fundamentally, things could happen. It would just be very, very brutal, as to say. It would probably involve a lot of, a lot of banging on doors and a lot of lobbying externally. So I think it's going to be better and easier for everybody if the regulator takes on a very cohesive role and looks at the market in a general manner, right? And sees essentially what's happening in that market and tries to stay abreast of those developments. And so what we've been doing at ADGM is essentially we've been working very, very closely with our licensed firms to find out exactly what they're doing and also how they're pivoting. And so what happens is that when their business model somewhat changes a little bit because either they're implementing a new business model or a new technology, we get that initial heads up, and that allows us to basically have a bit of a pulse of the market and where it's going. So given that and given this sort of heads up that we have, we've been very, very keen on taking those learnings and applying them straight away. So instead of waiting, 2-3 years down the line to see if something is going to, stick or not, we're very, very keen to build a good regulatory frameworks straight up, from the ground up. And so we've done, as Carmen already mentioned, we did the digital assets framework, which we are very, very proud of. And even more recently, we are currently in the process of putting together a framework for open finance. So not just about the idea of open banking, but really open finance. And the idea is that third-party providers will be able to connect to all sorts of fintech solutions, but also to other financial institutions to be able to provide really niche value on services to consumers. So that's a couple, very good, I guess, framework initiatives that we're keen to present, simply because, as you mentioned, as a regulator, the idea is very much to create this environment that works for everybody, Otherwise, it will privilege, bigger corporates over smaller, and that doesn't build a sustainable environment.
Thank you so much. So I think, as you mentioned, the scope in ADGM is quite a lot. So companies can approach the ADGM to, initiate the fintech processes, to start the companies there, and they are going to support for the new startups. Moving to Mr. Pankaj Mundra, since using background for last, more than 2 decades, I would say. And digital finance, includes a variety of products. It includes applications, processes, and business models as well. So, how I would like to ask you, how are banks addressing the shift, from traditional banking to digital banking? What steps they are taking and how they are keen to move the paradigm shift?
Thanks, Chirag. And, you know, interesting question. So basically, well, banks are already have making themselves equipped to compete with the fintechs. They already started investing through various modes. So you have a Mashreq Neo Bank. Fab has come with in UAE Abu Dhabi with the innovation. So most of the bank is already addressing the digital finance, and they equipping themselves to compete with the fintech, because the see the trend is most of us individually today are spending time on our mobile phone or a iPhone or a iPad and so on and so forth. So we become so used to spending time on technology and social media. It become easy for and fintech to reach out to a customer through digital finance. So banks have already come and doing innovation through various ways. One, they're doing their in-house IT development, okay, which is banks like Emirates NBD ahead of the game in UAE. You have Mashreq Neo. So that's on the UAE banking system side. In Oman, Bank Muscat is investing. So that's one. The bank is investing themselves in automation and digital finance themselves. Second, they're investing in fintech. Yeah. So banks have set up apart a corpus to invest in fintech, where by investing in this fintech, they're also getting to know what is happening, what sort of a innovation is coming in, and they're becoming much up to date as they themselves investing in fintech, either through fintech funds or directly. So world over, you have a bank like ING invested in fintech and fintech funds. You have a Citibank got VC fund in San Francisco. You have a Standard Bank from Africa investing in fintech and fintech fund. So banks are becoming very aggressive, as they all know they will miss the bus. As we all know, 10 years back, the top 10 listed financial services companies with a market cap was banks. Yeah. Be it ICBC, Bank of China, Citibank, JP Morgan, so on and so forth. Today, out of top 10 market cap, 6 are fintech. You have Ant Financial, MasterCard, Visa, and so on and so forth. So they all know that they are being left behind, and they are putting their best to come and compete with other boys. So the own innovation, all innovation, investing in through funds, investing in fintech directly, and they're also coming and doing sort of a putting in some money in seed funding and all, because they want to know what sort of innovation is coming in. And of course, the digitization is the way, because they all know the customer is spending more time on technology and their mobile phone.
Great.
Over to you.
Thank you so much, Pankaj. Just, out of curiosity, one more question I would like to reiterate to you. See, traditional banking is still going on, and 100% it cannot be digitalized. So do you think, in your opinion, the traditional banking would be washed out and only digital banking will be there 10 years down the line? Because digital banking, I think some scope cannot be fulfilled by digital banking. So just wanted to you can throw some light on this.
So Chirag, banking has so many verticals. You have corporate banking, which is wholesale banking. You have a treasury. You have a FI, financial institution business. You have a wealth management. You have a consumer banking, and consumer banking then have further personal loan, credit card, mortgage, and so on and so forth. If you ask me, when it comes to consumer banking, okay, almost 80 to 90% of your customer acquisition will move to digital finance or digitization. Okay, you don't require customer to come into your branch. The bank statement can be analyzed. The credit evaluation can be done through online. So the retail consumer banking will move towards fintech and towards technology, be it acquisition, credit analysis, monitoring, collections, and so on and so forth. I will say the major part of consumer banking, which will be still traditional, will be the collections. It's still somebody has to go and knock the door when he is defaulted on his payment. Okay. So the collection part will be still mix of technology and manual, the traditional, but rest all will move to technology and digitization. When it's come to corporate banking, it cannot move 100% to fintech or digitization. You still have to go and meet the corporate customer. You have to still go and see his manufacturing plant. You have to still go and see a cement plant in Ras Al Khaimah or Fujairah or in some part of India and other part of the world. So corporate banking, certain portion like supply chain, payments will move to technology, but still the acquisition of corporate customers, okay, will be still traditional. Treasuries, of course, will move to technology when it comes to processing the transaction. But when a dealer has to talk to another dealer, he will still make a call whether you want to sell or buy a foreign currency, on a larger transaction. So traditional banking will not completely eliminate it. There will be a fair mix between both traditional and digitalization, and that too more to do with corporate banking and retail banking.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Pankaj, for highlighting, the valid point. Now, moving to Mr. Muhammad Adam, I would like to ask you, see, COVID has hit now, and now technological advancements in fintech have become paramount and need of an hour. So what do you think? What fintech trend emerged this year, post-COVID, that was, not on the radar in previous years? And what changes we are seeing right now post-COVID? Because of this, technology, we are here because of this bizarrely modern technology, right? We can meet virtual. So how do you think, the technology has shifting post-COVID scenario?
So honestly, I cannot say that there's a certain trend or technology that were not existing before COVID. Most of them, they existed, but no, they were not under the spotlight. COVID managed to bring a lot of technology under the spotlight. Some people say that the best CTO of the year for 2020 is COVID, because it pushed everyone to enhance, and digital first policies has become on the front line. So if you go to a simple, let's address, for example, the payment processes or digital payment. Digital payment was there always. There was a lot of apps, a lot of channels to digital payment. The digital onboarding of the customers for the banking and other services was always there. But during the COVID time, during the last year, we've seen jumps into the acceptance of the processes. For example, in 2019, most of the big banking platforms, or even some of the regulators, they were skeptical about using remote onboarding, facial recognition, and biometric. But now it become the norm, and so on. We saw a lot of processes has been introduced in a mere, let's say, in less than 3 months, that usually used to take around a year just to test and verify and make sure that it works for everyone. And that's good, because the more that you can enable, the more that you can onboard into the country in terms of fintech, the better. The other thing that we noticed is the increase of the rate of fintech introduction. Back in 2018, 2019, the number of fintech that are incorporated, whether it's in ADGM or the IFC, and most of them, they used to be in those premium zones, has been increased. And we start seeing a lot of small companies starting in all over the country. And most of them, they get the benefit from the unique opportunity was presented by COVID, starting from QR service based all the way to remote services, even going to healthcare, education, whether it's related to financial transaction or enablement of digital empowerment through the need, because of the need of the distance, the need of social distancing, and the need of services to be delivered to home, and so on. So I think COVID was a big contributor, but it's just, it opened the gate. And once that took shape, it will keep going on.
Great. So fintech is having a great future ahead. In this decade, as Carmen mentioned, you are also mentioning, in 2020, 30, this era is a technological era wherein so many transformations are taking place in terms of artificial intelligence, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, in all the spheres of technology. So I was reading, yesterday, their interesting fact came out when, I was planning for this session. So I read around 2 billion people in the developing world lack access to a bank, and 200 million small businesses cannot get the credit they need to grow. There is a gap estimated at around $2.2 trillion. So people cannot access the banks in developing countries. Around 200 million cannot get the credit. So that's how, the solution is digital finance, and the idea that individuals and companies can have the access to payments, savings, credit products only with the help of mobile phone. So through digitization, a smartphone has converted into a wallet, a checkbook, or a bank branch even. So moving to Ms. Carmen, there are different products for fintech. Can you highlight few of the latest products or the technology through fintech that is emerging in the last 2 years?
I can say within Abu Dhabi, what we've seen the biggest growth in the firms that we have been attracting has been a lot in asset management and using kind of new tools to accelerate different ways of structuring this. But the biggest growth we've seen is in the digital asset space here. Also, payment solutions has been another huge area of growth with ADGM. Actually, microfinance and trade finance have been two areas that we've been working very closely with ADGM on, building new solutions to use ADGM as the jurisdiction to address some of those undertapped markets in Asia, in Africa, and beyond. Just given the regulatory regime that we have, the proximity to a lot of sovereign wealth funds, and the relationships in the UAE with a lot of those nations. So we've really been a hub for building out some of those solutions. In terms of other specific areas of fintech growth that we're seeing, I think currently it's a lot of it is focused around digital assets. I think Gabrielle, I'm going to kick this one over to you as well. You're seeing it more on the ground. I think for us at Audio, we're really seeing more of the larger. So I'm seeing a lot more asset managers who are looking to come and set up and take advantage of the jurisdiction. But on the actual fintech front, I'm going to kick this over to you again. I'm sorry.
No, just Carmen, can you exemplify a few of the digital assets, practical examples of digital assets if you have come across?
Digital asset firms?
Yeah, kind of technology based.
Sure. So I think within ADGM, we've worked with quite a few of them. So within digital asset space, Audio invested in MidChange, which is a digital asset multilateral trade facility that's based in ADGM, hoping to go live quite soon. We've also, within that ecosystem, there is BitOasis. There is also, I think, Matrix and a couple of other firms who are aiming to go live quite shortly. But within the exchange space more broadly, you would have seen last week, actually, ICE Futures just launched in ADGM with the first Merben trading product, which has been quite game-changing in terms of commodity trading and how that'll transform the industry here as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for enlightening this. So moving to Ms. Gabrielle. So again, since you are part of ADGM, how do you keep up fintech trends as a regulator? And is there anything new that you are seeing in this particular space when you talk about fintech?
No, there's definitely new stuff, right? But actually, I was really piqued by the fact that you talked a lot about, the issues with SMEs and getting SME financing and trade financing on that front. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about what we're doing there, because that's evidently something very key that we're seeing is important and necessary for the market. Now, I think we've learned, and not just here in the UAE, but across the world fundamentally, is that SMEs are literally the backbone of a sustainable economy, right? They are the backbone. If you want a sustainable economy, you need, SMEs of all sorts, right? It can be from small traders, it can be market traders, it can be, small shops, it can be, companies of 10, 20, 50 employees and such. They are the backbone of the economy. But fundamentally, it is very, very difficult for them to get loans, right? It is terribly difficult. And it comes from two reasons. First of all, the banks in the region, and not just the UAE, but just abroad as well, they have a lot of difficulty about measuring the risk assigned with providing credit scores, with providing credit to SMEs and such. And so we get a dual problem. So the ones they do accept, when they do accept to lend to SMEs, they charge them an extortionate rate, right? It's very, very high rate. And so evidently the best SMEs, they don't go down that route. They decide, okay, no, it's just too expensive. We're going to find other ways of getting financing, right? Getting debt financing or via equity financing or such a way. They find a way, right? They go through through connections, they go through friends, they go through other things, right? And they don't go through the banks. But those that do take the loans from the banks are often not the best ones because they'll take those high rates. And then often there will be defaults. And when there are defaults, then the bank says, hey, you see, I knew it was a bad idea to lend to SMEs. So this is an ongoing problem that we have seen and that we have felt. And so one of the things that we are doing at the moment in the UAE is we're building an SME platform in order to connect SMEs of the region to institutions and to financial institutions in order to be able to somewhat de-risk that. And by doing so, we're going to try to connect to a number of data sources that will help the banks to, in a way, better due diligence their potential portfolio of SME loans. And that's something, and as you mentioned, it's what are the fintech trends we're seeing? That was something that we definitely saw because, we cannot count on small fintech startups to, be the bridge that gaps all the issues that we potentially have in finance with undeserved markets. So we thought, okay, in that case, this is a way we can see a trend in the market and we can actually resolve it in such a way.
Sorry. Thank you, Gabriel, for your enlightenment. Mr. Muhammad Adam, in your profile, I read, you are involved in one of the initiatives with DED for the fintech technology. So can you discuss about that? Can you elaborate how, this technology is going to help specifically SMEs for the digitized payment solutions? Yeah, this technology, I believe, is based on digitized payment solution. So please throw some light how this technology is going to benefit to SMEs point of view and how it will change the traditional approach of doing the digital finance.
Absolutely. So the mission of government of Dubai or mission of UAE in general is going cashless, being able to transfer the whole economy to cashless and solving a lot of problems down the road while going into that path. And the first challenge we faced was just like my colleague mentioned, that banks will not give those SMEs accounts and they will not have credit history. They will not be able to, let's say, even on acceptance level. Today, if you want to accept card, there's a higher cost acquiring card that small merchant, micro merchant will not be able to pick up. If you say that, okay, let them use wallets, again, you hit another wall. Most of the wallet, they are operate into small fragmented space. So you see wallet A, they have 2,000 merchants, wallet B has 4,000 merchants, and then they compete, and then you end up with users carrying 10 wallets. And each shop, I need to see which wallet works in this shop. So what government Dubai decided to do is to build the infrastructure, to create one platform that serves everyone, regardless what's your size. It doesn't matter if you are a listed bank who have 10,000 customers or a fintech who just started yesterday with 2 users. So everyone will be accepted on that platform as long as they are going under the regulation in UAE. So first of all, the first condition is to be regulated. If you're a fintech, you just need to be regulated. Once you are regulated, automatically you are accepted on this network. You will get access to, according to DED plan, within less than 2 years, you will be able to access more than 150,000 merchants in UAE. And those merchants are not only merchants registered in Dubai, but also merchants registered in Dubai with branches everywhere else. It's one country. So if you have a branch in Abu Dhabi, it will be on the same acceptance network. The idea is to be able to accept not only wallets, but also cards, and not only local product, but also international. One of our partners, or one of the companies that are joining also the network, is WeChat. So you will be able to accept international WeChat, Paytm, and so on. Think about this as UBI India, the same way UBI changed how fintech works in India. That's the goal. The only difference here in UBI India, you have the banks joining the network with their own merchant. Here, the merchant is created by all the country itself, or by the DED themselves, and then offered for everyone on equal basis. For the small merchant, SME, what they are getting, first of all, they get a digital account, digital banking account, proper digital banking account. So we call it settlement account, which means an account where you can receive all your digital payment in one go. After that, we can issue one of the other digital accounts like E20 from NI, from Emirates Islamic, Emirates Group, or Mashraq Neo Biz, or FAB digital product, or CBD. So it's open. The network offers you all the major products in the market. So it's a marketplace. At the same time, we ease the entry of the SME by giving them free digital account. They don't have cost on it. They can receive the money directly. The fees within that network is also not regulated, let's call it preferred. So we are asking all the payment provider on the network to give a good incentive. Today, if you are a small merchant and you went to one of the acquirer for card payment, they will give you the highest charge because you don't have traffic. In the network, it's the other way around. The small merchant get the lowest charge, and the BSP is free to charge whatever he wants to the big one. So that's how they are looking at it to solve it.
Great, thank you so much. So when this product is going to launch, it's very soon, or how long it is going to take?
Actually, it's good that you asked that. This is a good proof how COVID changed things. The actual announcement was about the program was in GITEX, and we are launching in May.
Okay, that's great. Wonderful. We are looking forward for this product. Thank you so much for letting us know. So when we talk about, any technology, financial technology, it helps in business sustainability and reducing the financial risk and operational risk in the organization. Yeah. But having said that, there are various inherent risks in fintech business, be it compliance or from regulatory side, or it be a governance risk. So I would throw this question to Mr. Pankaj. What elements, Pankaj, what are the elements of a broad-based fintech risk and compliance management? It associated with some risk, inherent risk. So what are the elements of a broad-based fintech risk and compliance management?
So thanks, Chirag. Basically, there are one is from a compliance perspective. Of course, as we all know, traditionally and for a long time, banks have very strict compliance in terms of the onboarding of customers. And of course, when the transaction is going through the rail of the bank, when the transaction is getting processed. While all fintechs are doing a fantastic job to have a compliance mechanism in place to process the payments transaction, be it PayPal or Paytm or M-Pesa in Kenya for that matter. Having said that, still there are some banks who are not highly regulated or not regulated entities, though they have put their best of the architect in place, but the regulators as well as the founders need to be sure that all the technology and the compliance checks are in place. So I will put it this way, that the founders of the fintechs are coming along to put the best of the compliance which they can put in the architect, so that the transactions goes to the compliance check, versus traditional bank, which they've been more conservative when it comes to compliances. Having said that, from a risk perspective, I think the key risk is the when a fintech onboard a bank, okay, or a customers, the sustainability of that fintech. Because tomorrow, if they don't get a pre-series A or Series B, and if they're not able to execute their plans, they already onboarded a banks. So the one risk which I see is that where a B2B fintech have already onboarded a bank on the platform, and they're not able to execute what they promised to a bank. And there's a lot of credibility risk for the bank. Okay, so that's one risk. Of course, on the data security, which is the most talked about subject, whether it's social media, Facebook, or fintech in that sense, data leakage and so on and so forth. So that's another challenge, which a lot of things have been done, and the founders are coming along very strongly. But yes, you do run that risk. And so the data privacy, which is the most talked about subject, that I have come here as a credit card customer. I'm just giving an example of classic case of Flipkart in India. Now, when the Flipkart was sold to Walmart, okay, at a fantastic valuation of $20 billion, and it was most talked about subject, that why the valuation was so high. So Flipkart was launched in 2007 and 8, and 2018 it got a valuation of $20 billion. Now that was a purely e-commerce, right? Now they are launching embedded finance, okay, where you will able to sell the insurance, okay, to the Flipkart customer. You will able to sell insurance to Amazon customers, okay. So now data is being monetized and for the various other financial services project. So for company like Amazon, Flipkart, it is called embedded finance, okay, where e-commerce is becoming a fintech, okay. Now when you start selling the financial services product to these customers, whether you have taken a proper consensus from these clientele to use this data to sell a financial services product. Because when the customer was onboarded, it was not a regulated fintech, it was an e-commerce. But now it's going through a transition of becoming a customer, which we all are going through. But I think they are catching up. So I think, too short, the data secrecy, the data privacies, and putting a robust compliance in place versus a I will say a matured bank, if you have to compare that. So I think these are the key things. But I think if you ask me frankly, with the investment what the founders are putting in and the VCs are putting in, I think they were able to sail through these transitions, and they were able to deliver better quality compliances with data secrecy. Data privacy will still become a bit of a challenging issue, and we see how they overcome. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Pankaj, for beautiful put it across all the points. So yeah, as you mentioned, data privacy, breach of confidentiality. This is the concern of in this. I always believe if there is a issue in the privacy or the breach of confidentiality, see, the technology definition is if we are meeting the expectation of the stakeholders, and this is the most important expectation of the stakeholder, that the security concerns. And this is the primary, I think, objective of the technology, to safeguard the data of the customers. But again, as you said very validly, that there are concerns, there are security measures in technology and innovation always. Now, Carmen, I would like to ask you, if you allow me, will these concerns, as we are talking about privacy and concerns regarding security measures, will these concerns over data sharing and security, would it delay the progress and hinder the innovation? What do you think, Ms. Carmen?
I think when it comes to risk management, I think it's a big dependencies on the jurisdiction that you're in and the rules that are in place. That you have a really collaborative approach as a regulator to working with startups hand in hand to enable their progress rather than hold them back. So I think that's the most important part for fintechs to move forward and for innovation to actually happen, is to find the right jurisdiction and the right regulator to actually enable that success and that growth. When it comes to risk management, data protection, etc., I think part and parcel of regulating financial infrastructure is just of much more importance with fintechs, as tech is just a much larger part of the business model. So how that data is managed, how it's updated, how it's changed, the controls that are placed on that, and how you manage risk with tech for fintechs in that particular sector.
Okay. And also, there is one global data protection. I think European Union, they have recently issued the law, GDPR, if I'm not wrong, global data protection. So I would like to ask Mr. Mohammed, your perspective in this, this concerns on the security issues and data privacy, as Mr. Pankaj mentioned, and whether any kind of law is going to come in UAE. What's your perspective in this? Because this is the concern as a whole for technology, the data privacy and confidentiality of the data. What's your thought on this?
It's one of the issues that we faced when we were designing acceptance on city level, especially when you're talking about city focused on tourists, and a lot of tourists are coming with their own payment channels. What kind of data that you can keep belonging to those tourists? And you know that according to some aspect of the law, any data created within the city belongs to the city, but there's aspect of that data belongs to the person itself, where that aspect changes. And we face the same thing when we try to provide services for for the users. We are talking about something called alternative credit scoring, which means using other data feed to change the credit score of the users, and that will lead us also to issues about the data and the privacy. So I think the only way we could manage to solve it was to depend on the consent. The definition of consent is different from one region to another. Some region, the consent, or some areas, even if the customers give you the consent, does not give you the right by law to use those data. But it's use or case by case, use case by use case differentiation. So what we are planning, or what I would advise anyone in the fintech space within UAE to focus on the local privacy laws, because in the end of the day, even if your service is used by international users, your operation limitation here could protect you.
So, Mr. Mohammed Adam, is there any local laws right now? Is there any local laws pertaining to data security and privacy with regards to fintech in UAE?
Actually, yes. Dubai has a couple of laws, but again, the federal law is there. There's a law about the personal and that law is as old as 1980s. But when it comes to the new laws that addresses the use of digital data, there is certain laws like Dubai data law. We have laws in the IFC. We have ADGM, who has Gabriel can shed the light on that more than me when it comes to
Yeah, I was about to. Correct.
ADGM.
Yes. Thank you so much for enlightening. So, Gabriel, I would like to again ask you the same question. What concerns, do you think whether this data privacy and confidentiality is going to hinder the innovation, technological innovation, and what ages this hinder in the innovation?
Absolutely. I think when it comes down to it, and this was already mentioned, it's about the question of consent, right? And we're very, very much looking at that, because what happens is that, and this is one of the issues with GDPR, is that ultimately you had consumers who had to give their consent on a routine basis every couple months, 2-3 months. And that got in the way of seamless products. If you were going to, use, for instance, a payments aggregator or a data aggregator, for all your bank accounts, and you're constantly being pushed with two-factor authentication to be able to reconnect to your bank accounts every other week, it became a very, very difficult rule to implement in such a way as to provide seamless financial services, whether you're on the financial service provider side as a bank or institution, or whether you are as a fintech, right? And so what happens is what we're doing here in line is, because as you can remember, we are a fairly young jurisdiction, we have the benefit of being able to build out frameworks from the ground up, is we're looking carefully and, we're speaking with our licensed companies to see how we can create is safe, it's secure, you can give your consent out to give your data, but it doesn't become an overly heavy and overly shadowing rule of legislation and law that will ultimately bog down our fintechs in such a way. So that's something that's currently still in the process of being discussed and looking out for.
Great. Thank you so much. So ADGM is, having their laws which would protect the data privacy and confidentiality of their clients, right? Perfect. And we are looking forward, for more ADGM initiatives on data privacy and confidentiality. So coming back to Mr. Mohammed Adam, since, it's related to your profile, so I would like to ask this question to you. See, in technology, when it comes to accountability, we sometimes become unsure about the accountability, whether the technology or the product itself is accountable or the innovator is accountable. So could artificial intelligence develop to the point, where they are accountable for their own actions? And perhaps should we trust artificial intelligence more than we trust ourselves to manage our money? So I think it's quite interesting question. So you can highlight this on your perspective, please?
Absolutely. I'd like to compare AI to normal human or any employee. Let's look at two different firms. One firm which has policies, regulation, processes, and insists that every employee do his job by the steps, by the policy. Do not try to innovate. Do not try to do anything extra. Just do exactly what you are told to do. And think about another, let's say, firm which ask their employees to think outside of the box and to see the bigger picture and think about the spirit of the policies or the procedures instead of the procedures themselves. Definitely, there's a big difference in performance between both organizations, and that's AI for you. So if you say that I'll give it to the AI, think about that. Think about that. Everything will be done the way you expect it. You will not get surprised. Okay, the only time that you will get surprised is that if you expect the AI to do something extra or act on a gut feeling, that will never happen. Even when they tell you about, evolving systems, expert systems that could learn, that could enhance, or can come up with, let's say, a different way to do the operation based on building neural network and so on. It has its limit. It will never mimic the ability of, let's say, going out of the line to do something different. So that's my humble opinion on that. Maybe my colleagues have another opinion.
Okay, great. So in your opinion, you are saying artificial intelligence is having their own role, but again, the human intervention has to be there, for many business models. We cannot be dependent on artificial intelligence completely. Going ahead, of course, right now we are dependent on humans, but going ahead, let's say in 2040, which UAE is going to be one of the best cities in the world, country in the world. So in 2040, do you think the human intervention would be limited to only 10% in terms of when we talk about banking and the blockchain or artificial or this digitized world?
So as long as the job requires to follow a certain set of regulations and laws, yes, AI will take over. You don't need human to do that.
Okay, that's very short and good answer. Thank you, Mr. Pankaj ji. So since you are from banking industry, I've asked you regarding the compliance and risk. Just one last question. If I would like to ask you, can you throw some light? What would be the paradigm shift in digitalization or fintech industry, to bridge the current gaps? If you can highlight, okay, these are the current gaps and how the technology is shifting towards the digitization or fintech industry to bridge the current gaps.
I think if you ask me, I feel one of the current gap could be the technology with some sort of a involvement or interference of human and the human emotions. Yeah. So in the traditional world, when you used to go to a branch manager will sell you a product or make you a customer. On a customer service, now you use EVA, So if you call Emirates NBD, hey, I'm your EVA, and so on and so forth. So I think that bit of, while there are so many things which we can, focus, talk about, but one of the things that in some shape and form is still, of course, now there are a lot of AI and the technology being used to still give a feeling to a customer of the personal experience. But I think I still feel if some shape and form, I think the way I see, which already some banks started with Zoom call, Teams call, not physically, but still you have that human touch where your customer service or your relationship manager once in a while could interact with you with Zoom call or a team call or a Google Meet and so on and so forth. I think that has come over last 1 year, mandatorily because of the work from home and so on and so forth. But if the bank and the fintech could also good mix by maybe 1 out of 100 customer or maybe high net worth customers or a large loan customer, where once in a while they also get to speak to one of the RM at some point of time. So I just give example of we have for our trade fintech, we also have registered one of our entities in Singapore, and we have got our new account opened with one of the neo bank in Singapore. And of course, everything was through technology and there was no interaction. But we found it a bit challenging to do our first transaction. and then we get a mail from an RM that, hey, let's come on a Zoom call. And then we went on a Zoom call and we understood how to operate that account. Yeah. So things like that. I think that's where if that human touch come, where you say, hey, I'm available, not the robotical okay 24/7 and WhatsApp thing, but more of yes, as a Pankaj or as a Chirag, I'm available to have a Zoom call with one of the customer who may want to have the interaction to avail or use that service or do that transaction.
Great. So I think the technology is having its own pros and cons. Everything is having its own pros and cons. So human intervention will always be there. It cannot be 100% digitized. Digital finance transformation, I believe it's a holistic approach, to financial management that relies on the digital landscape and innovative technology. And if executed effectively, of course, there are, as Pankaj mentioned and Mr. Mohammed, all the panelists mentioned, that there are some, pros and cons related with that. So if executed effectively, finance transformation, I believe, can offer significant benefits, such as improved efficiency and tangible financial gains. Apart from, reduction in the time involvement, human resources, accuracy, these all are benefits that are there. But last question, I would like to ask everyone, you can just throw some light. What do you think the future of digital finance, the fintech, the future, as we already asked by Ms. Carmen, but I would like to ask, in crux, what do you think down the line in 2030, what would be the future of this, and whether, it is good to invest in fintech right now, and what would be the future? Whether it's a bright, it's a gloomy, how do you think?
So I would like to, if you're allowed to take up this question.
Please.
I think I want to add on very simply, as you earlier mentioned about close to 200 million people, or I think 2 billion people, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, 2 billion
you mentioned on the financial inclusion side. I think the technology and fintech will play a very big role to bring all these, to people out of 2 billion number who have not got their SME loan, not got their first bank account opened up, and more human beings, more and more our citizens come, especially in emerging and frontier market, come into banking system, come into fintech system, will drive the social revolution in these markets, the growth of these markets. So I think that's the key value add in terms of the investment and returns. We all have known that if you come and taken a risk in coming in a angel round or a seed round, people have made more than 100x. So I think I will put as advice to our sort of audience today, and maybe all my peer fellow colleagues could also add, that if you're investing $100, if you have $100 of investable corpus, is $100 or $1 million or $10 million, X percentage of yourself should set apart for VC, sort of a private equity or VC investments, where you will either invest in angel round or in pre-series A round versus a fixed deposit or a bonds or a gold or a stock market. Over to you.
Wonderful, Pankaj. So I think, future is very bright as Pankaj mentioned, and we should invest in fintech for sure. So other peer panelists, can you please, answer this? What would be the future in your opinion? Ms. Carmen, can you answer?
I think Carmen already answered, no? She was pro blockchain, but I'm happy to take this one.
To blockchain, I would just say, I'll let Gabrielle take over. I would say just purely digital financial services businesses that don't require a physical presence. I think that will see a big rise in, just given what we've seen in the world in the last 12 months. I think that'll definitely be another area that'll grow other than just blockchain. But Gabrielle.
Great. Gabrielle, what's your take on this? Thank you so much.
So I think what's going to be very, very interesting is the fact that, so how we know that finance and payments in general, it's part and parcel of our lives, right? So, you can't dissociate it from daily life. You go out, you go buy milk, you go, take your car, you go, it's everything. There's a payment process at all these different points. And I'm very, very excited. And in general, we are as ADGM as well, in the fact that there's going to be a lot more payments infrastructure is going to be built in the IoT space, right? Soon there's going to be a lot of more machine-to-machine payments, such that all those points of friction where you personally go to the store to buy milk might not necessarily happen anymore. It might be automatically ordered, by sensors in your fridge. All this is going to happen very, very rapidly in the next 10 years. And that's going to require regulation on a whole different front, because it's one thing regulating a company that's doing payments when you tap your card. It's a whole different thing if you're regulating payments, doing machines doing payments to each other. And that's going to be very, very exciting, because fundamentally we can't dissociate this financial aspect from our lives. But that's the way I see it in the next 10, 15 years. However, I would not tell people to put all their money in VC funds straight away. VC is highly, highly risky.
Great. Thank you so much. So we are talking about, one point just we need to highlight, and I would like to ask Mr. Mohammed Adam. Fintech, is bridging the gap when it comes to traditional process we have already discussed of the financial services with the help of, trade efficiency analytics, trade automation, and machine learning as well. So, Mr. Adam, can you throw some light, how will trade automation, trade efficiency analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning affect trading professionals as fintech progresses in 2021? So what's your perspective in this? You are on mute, Mr. Mohammed Adam. Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry. Yeah.
So it's more or less about removing the barriers of entry. Today, when you are looking at the traders, whether it's trading on the trading floor or trading on direct on goods and economies, the barrier of entry is in the point of acceptance, the transaction itself, and also understanding what's the value of what you are buying or selling. The whole process currently is shifting towards a digital platform that provides you with more data about the goods you are buying, more data about their value. And not only that, but also the forecast of the market movement in the future. And that's where I see the future movement of fintech, to be able to predict in more accuracy the shifts in the market, to be able to predict more accuracy how to manage your portfolio. We talked about the AI role, but we mentioned that there's also human intervention and human guts and understanding of human nature. Sometimes market shifts due to, let's say, change that machine cannot predict. But if you can manage to mix both sides, the best that you can get from the platforms, AIs, and the best that you can get from the expertise of those people who worked for many years, you will reach the next level. And I don't think it's that far. We are not talking about the next 10 years even. Within the upcoming, let's say, 9 years from now until 2030, I think using those platforms would be something equal to downloading a social app and using it, something you can learn by default. And that will require a lot of financial education. And that's another aspect we really need in our societies. We don't have the correct financial education, especially for youngsters who are growing up today. They don't understand that aspect. Managing the financial aspect also another area that we should really focus on.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we don't have much time, although we have many questions, and all the panelists would love to answer that, but because of short of time, I would like to thank panelists, for being so sporty and sharing your wisdom and knowledge. So I would like to thank everyone, Ms. Carmen James, Ms. Gabrielle, Mr. Mohammed Adam, and Mr. Pankaj Mundra. Thank you so much for being here and for all your wisdom and knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chirag, and wish you all the best. And thanks to all the organizers, and hope to you sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pankaj ji. Thank you. Thank you. Over to you, host. Thank you.